with Kali specifically.
Well, we're having a little bit of connection problem. Can you guys hear me?
So technically speaking, we can hear you. I started recording because Joseph dropped. So yeah, it's all good. So
Do we
technically, I'm.
want to
So
do we want to wait for him to come back in the conversation?
yeah,
There he is.
he is there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I record Joseph this time. So yeah, I started recording. So it's kind of Arndell. I am really honored to have you here because I read some of your material, some of your books, and I also closely follow your Facebook posts. And wherever your name is mentioned, you were heavily complimented. And since you work with Asmodeus and Kali, we decided to invite you here. So if you can give us some background about how you started practicing with Kali and Asmodeus, and what is your practice based on, and just relax and talk about yourself for a while.
Okay. Well, my first encounter with Kali was through another person. His name was Jeremy Petersak, and that was about 25 or 26 years ago now. And Jeremy used to tell me that Kali was his spirit guide. And I didn't know much about Kali at the time, but he was a good friend of mine, and he was a musician, and I respected him, so I respected him. And I had two experiences with Kali early on. I'll go ahead and tell you about them. This one was that we were sitting in a room somewhere, I don't remember where, and he said that Kali was there at the room. And I don't remember what he said, how she's going to manifest, but I remember looking over towards one corner of the room and just seeing her dance into the room. And she had what looked like to me at the time a grass skirt, like you would see hula dancers or dancers in Hawaii that have a grass skirt. And she also had a particular crown on her head. And later I learned that she has a dress made of either hands or sometimes penises. And that's what I was seeing. And she also had a particular jagged looking crown on her head with jewels right here. And I had never seen that crown before. And later when I saw pictures of her, it was like, wow, I was really seeing her. And she danced into the room, and she had four arms, and the arms would sway like this, and then the arms would move so fast that there would be just big blurs of light, like just huge bands of light on either side of her. And her body was, and I say this without, I'm not lusting after her, but her body was absolute perfection, like a sculpture. And I just saw her perfectly clearly that time, and I knew that there she was. And the next time that I had an encounter with her, in that same guy, Jeremy, we were driving along in a car. And Jeremy looks over at me and he says, I want to tell you something, but Kali doesn't want you to know. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of strange, but I kind of shrugged my shoulders and I said, okay, well, go ahead and tell me. So he looks at me and he says, blah, 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 tells me something. And then we're driving along minutes later, and he looks over at me and he says, you don't know what I just told you, do you? I thought about it, and I kind of scratched my head. I was like, no, I don't. I don't know what you just said. And so he said, okay, I'm going to tell you again. So he looks over at me, and he's looking me dead in the eye, and he tells me again, blah, 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 blah. So that time I'm paying real close attention, and there was a sound that seemed to come from the back seat of the car. And the only way that I can describe it is to kind of make this sound like this. It was like almost like a pulse or something. And then I had the sensation that someone just took a washcloth and wiped the thought right out of my mind. Just took it from my mind. That simple. And I still to this day don't know what it was that he told me. But it was very remarkable because I realized at that moment that gods do exist in this astral plane, in this astral world around us, and that they can simply reach in and pluck a thought or a memory right out of our mind, and we won't know what it is. That's the power of the gods. They do have this power. So I would like to say that with Kali, my experience with her is more of like a son to a mother, or just a worshiper. I don't really view her in the same way that I interact with most other spirits. I've never tried to call her up in a magic circle or anything like that. I just talk to her like a son might talk to a good mother. And sometimes when she wishes to, she appears to me or she helps me with small little things. I would go ahead and share one other thing that's happened to me with her, and that is that, and this was uh, recently, within the past year, I was having real bad insomnia and I couldn't go to sleep at night. And I was laying there and I was trying to sleep, and I just prayed to Kali and I said, Kali, can you help me? And I heard a soft female voice say the mantra, boo. And I kind of smiled to myself because it sounded like boo, like people call their boyfriend boo, or you know what I'm saying? And I very specifically knew that the sound that she was making was pronounced BHU, because as she said it, I could hear those syllables very clearly. And so I thought, well, okay, I might as well give it a try. And so I closed my eyes and I said, boo, like that. And as soon as I did it, I noticed that I yawned really big, and this feeling of sleepiness came over me. My eyes got heavy, almost like I was being hypnotized. And I vibrated that mantra deeply again, and the next thing you know, I was having the most deep sleep. And I was having a dream, and in that dream, I was telling someone, I said, Kali gave me a mantra, and it allowed me to go into the most deep sleep. And right now I'm dreaming, and it's so wonderful. I knew that I was dreaming, which is what they call lucidity, where you know that you're having a dream. So yeah, I would say are three of the most important experiences that I've had with Kali. And I look up to her a lot. I revere her as a goddess.
So
Wow.
what you just said is like crazy. There is so much shit me and Joseph resonate with here. There is so much overlap between our experiences, but we kind of never talk to each other. So this is really, really crazy shit. But what I wanted to talk about in this video for my side is how Kali relates to the chakra system. Now, usually when we learn about chakras, you probably know things about it. We learned that there are only 7 chakras, which are from the root to the crown, and nothing else is pretty much discussed. Well, through the work with Kali, she specifically told me that if somebody wants to work with the entities of the underworld, so any form of a Chthonic related practice, like working with demons of Goetia, for example, anything related to the underworld. It is not 7 chakras from the root to the crown that we should stimulate. Actually, there are chakras located in the human legs, which correspond to the lower worlds, and we have 7 of those centers in each leg. So Kali systematically led me on a wild goose chase alongside some other spirits, which lasted around 3.5 years and ended in me channeling some form of a comprehensive methodology of working with those centers. And what's really interesting is that when you work with those centers, and then you, for example, use mantras to summon entities which correspond to chaos and the underworld, they seem to come much more quickly. Because when you stimulate those centers, you kind of program your own energies to be conducive for the manifestation and perception of those energies from the underworld. So, what I figured out is technically in Hinduism, each chakra corresponds to the world, each chakra corresponds to the actual spiritual dimension. So, especially chakras which are like crown, third eye, throat center, and the heart center, they actually correspond to the higher celestial realms. And that's one of the reasons why people who work heavily with the chakras usually have really terrifying experiences with ectonic beings. Because if you are working heavily on those four centers, when you summon ectonic beings, which correspond to completely different centers of energy, you will definitely have energy shocks. Because you technically summon something for which you are completely unprepared to withstand since you don't work with those energies within the self. And it kind of explained enormous amount of negative experiences I had with demons and many other people had with demons, and it can only be attributed not to the chthonic beings of all of those different cultures, but to our own ignorance. And she also gave me really important advice, and you will definitely understand this advice. So you know that if you want to do a goetic operation, you as a grimoirist know, and you are much more well studied in the subject, there are specific tools which are really difficult to find, but actually are always in grimoires. For example, skulls or human bones or pelts of lions, things of that nature. And the reason why it is there is because those tools, those animal skins, those bones, they create energy resonance which is conducive for the manifestation of the spirit. So it's not necessarily something written in order to prevent you from working. There is actual technology there. So can you tell us, as a really experienced author, kind of how you work with Asmodeus, and can we talk a little bit about that? So we'll jump to Kali later on again.
Well, Arnudell, he was really speaking about fetishes, your use of fetishes, if you use them.
Well, I'm not really familiar with the term fetish as far as dealing with anything that I use. I do know what you mean as far as tools in the Goetia, like the lion skin belt and things like that. I did build all of the traditional Goetia tools and used that system for 20 years. And I did have a lion skin belt made from a house cat that I accidentally ran over with my truck. And I realized, hey, it's now November. So I took the cat and skinned it and made the lion skin belt. And from my experience, when I strapped the cat skin on my body, the ghost of that cat would enter into my aura, and you could hear it hissing and screaming like a wild animal, and it would affect how you conjured. You know, there was also, since it was a ghost, it made a connection to the world of the dead, and that world is the world which the Goetia spirits live in. So that tool is not necessarily symbolic for me, but something that is an extremely powerful tool. You know, it connects to you, it transforms you, it merges with you, the spirit of that animal. I also had one made from a raccoon skin.
So
Wow.
you're blowing my mind here. Did you have any experience with taxidermy prior to cleaning the cat and whatnot? Because there's a practical side to this stuff. I don't think most people have the stomach to actually go through that type of operation. Did you have any prior knowledge to that, or did spirits guide you through the taxidermy process? Or
Well, I grew up on a farm, and I had seen various animals skinned as a kid. My brother skinned a possum when I was a kid. You know, we used to hunt snakes and stuff with our BB guns. And I didn't have any experience with taxidermy, and I'd like to point out that I would not necessarily kill an animal for this purpose, but I killed it accidentally by running over its head with my
Right.
truck, and so hey, let's take advantage of this opportunity. So I just hung it up by its back legs and took a real sharp knife and separated the skin from the body. And then what I did was I poured salt all over the skin to dry it out. The salt will pull the moisture out of the skin. And then, of course, you have to write all of the Hebrew names that are on the magic circle in the snake, that's on the Goetia circle on that. And then I would wrap that in a sheet and then tie it around my waist.
You just gave pieces of information that is not presented anywhere. I hope the audience is appreciating this. So specific ordeals in your life were set up so you had the knowledge, you had the working knowledge to actually do these things. That's incredible. Really. What do you think about that, Demetrius? Have you ever killed an animal and used it in a magical operation, or?
So technically speaking, to make this even crazier, I also grew up in a farm, but I have certain medical condition which prevents me from being capable to kill animals. But I had a lot of dealings with animal bones in my magical operations. So once I picked up the goat skull, and then I did the necessary procedure to consecrate it to Azazel. You know, the demon Azazel, one of the more famous demons now, but he is still kind of pretty obscure. You two guys know who I am talking about.
Yes, yes.
Technically, what you do is you need to take a goat skull and you need to put it in a circle, and then you need to kind of around that circle you need to sprinkle the blood. So the circle needs to be bloody, and then you need to wear a red cloak, which is consecrated beforehand. In that red cloak, you need to go into this bloody circle, and then you need to light an incense. So that incense is kind of rising around the head of the goat, and then you kind of need to conjure Azazel into the incense to consecrate the head of the goat. So at the end of the process, you kind of have a fetish. So that's what I did. Technically speaking, what is interesting is the reason why I started this topic in the first place is because this level of like grotesque workings and amorality of practice and moral neutrality of spirits is, in my experience, present in Kali too. So Kali is too this chthonic, morally ambivalent force. And there are many things she kind of guided me to do, which are purposefully designed to kind of partially break the psyche. For example, I used the yantra to summon Kali given to me by the Hindu Ayan World Foundation. Unfortunately, I am incapable and not allowed to share it. I would really like to share it, but I am not allowed to share it publicly. So technically, I drew it, and then I summoned Kali using that yantra as a gateway. And when she came, I kind of fell into really deep trance. And then I was instructed to drink a little bit of my own urine, which I did. And then I entered into really intense possession experience, which was aggressive in nature. And the reason why I am sharing this is because all of those elements, summoning chthonic forces, performing actually transgressive acts, actually traumatizing yourself, they are all present in Hindu tradition, more or less, especially when we talk about darker gods such as Shiva and Kali and Dhumavati, for example. It's all present there. It's simply not discussed publicly. And that's why I kind of mashed the subjects together. Uh, and I think we should really discuss more the controversial aspects of magic, which are actually difficult and actually transgressive. For example, you preparing a cat skin That's a really good analogy to what I did, because it's actually really demanding to skin a cat, to merge with cat every time you summon. Like that animal spirit, that necromantic animal spirit entering you during every evocation. There is a level of trauma to that which is not, it's not easy to describe how it influences you, things of that nature. So can you like talk about your working with the dead? Like, like, did you ever did any necromancy?
Well, I'd like to share something real quick related to animals and trying to use an animal in magical workings. So, a friend of mine, Anasa Rose, I was watching one of her videos, and she was just telling a random story about using animals in magical operations related to Hecate. And she said, if you just so happen to be driving in your truck and you hit an animal, and just make sure that you get out and do the humane thing and put it out of its misery. And the very next day, just like she described, happened to me. I hit a possum, and it just so happened that possums are sacred animals to Hecate. And I pulled over, I took out my knife, and I finished killing it. But in the process of killing it, I experienced, I don't know if it was possession, but I felt like I was leaving my body. Like the I couldn't believe what I was doing, so I started like passing out. My consciousness started fluttering, and my eyes rolled in the back of my head. So here I am, like passing out beside this animal on the side of the road. So I was unable to take that animal and use it for what I believe was intended with the spirit Hecate, because I had just made contact with her a couple days. And like I said, these spirits set up ordeals so we can do magic better. Um, but yeah, in that instance, myself, I failed because I couldn't work with the animal. I started passing out after I finished killing it. So I just wanted to share that. It was related to you guys handled it like men. I personally couldn't. It was a bit too much for me. But yeah, he was asking you, Arnudell, about specifically necromancy.
I have not really messed with necromancy very much, unless you would call spiritual necromancy. In the around the time of the American Civil War, there was a movement that was born called spiritualism, and it was non-religious, and it just deals with things like tipping tables and Ouija boards and what's commonly known as a seance. I have held seances, and I did contact a spirit of the dead from my neighborhood, a man that had died within the past 3 days. I didn't know his name, and the Ouija board said, I am J.M., and it gave me those initials. And I remember looking up and telling the people in the room, it's saying, I am J.M., that's its initials. And at that moment, one of the people in the room got a phone call. And when he hung up the phone, we said, who was it? He said, oh, someone died just over the hill there. And we said, well, who was that? And he said, his name was Jeff. And we said, Jeff who? And he said, Jeff McLean. Okay. So here I was the only one at the Ouija board, and the spirit had just told me that its initials was JM, and come to find out someone had died within a 3-block radius of my house named Jeff McLean within the past 3 days. And I didn't have any way of knowing that. So to me, that was absolute and certain proof that we did contact Jeff McLean on the Ouija board. And I'd never heard of this guy before in my life. I looked it up. There he was in the newspaper and the obituaries. So you can call spiritualism necromancy because it's technically
Sure.
summoning the dead, but It's
Yeah,
not the same kind of necromancy that you might hear of in the earlier ages, like 1620. You know, that type stuff often had more of a religious trapping to it. It was more in the forms of spells. You can find necromancy spells in the old grimoires, like the Grand Grimoire and stuff like that. But I've never really been too attracted to calling up the dead. My focus is more on gods and angels and demons.
yeah,
So, Arundel, I seen one of your recent posts. Was excellent. Taken from an excerpt, Liber Asmodeus. So, what you were talking about in that, it blew my mind that Asmodeus actually took a vessel at different times. Um, uh, it, he actually had a body. Can you talk a little bit to that? Did he know who he was when he was inhabiting a human vessel?
Well, get into some pretty theoretical things right there. And I can tell you things that Asmodeus has told me, such as that there was an ancient cult of the Al Ghul that was 70,000 years ago, and that at one time he did have a body, and I was one of his children, and that, you know, things like that. But I kind of tend to try to keep the occult as practical as possible, and those kinds of things fall under unverified personal gnosis. I don't really
Right.
have any way to prove that there was an ancient cult of the Al Ghul 70,000 years ago, or that Asmodee ever had a body or had children. And the old legends are filled with some pretty strange stuff when you get to the concept of the Nephilim and exactly where Asmodee comes from. I mean, you got various legends. Some say that he was a Nephilim, which is, of course, a child born of the union between an angel and a mortal being. But, I mean, I got to be honest with you, that seems outrageous. I can't really understand how a spirit could make a baby with a mortal woman, but certainly the legends are there, and that is what the legend is, you know. So I don't know. I mean, the earth is billions of years old, and these spirits could have been all sorts of things. That guy that I was telling you about earlier that was really close to Kali, I asked him one time, I said, what is Kali? You know, where did she ultimately originate from? And he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, man, she might have been a T-Rex on this planet in a dinosaur age, and that was where she originally came from.
Well,
And it's true. We don't really have any way of grasping the immensity of time on this planet alone, let alone the cosmos. You see what I'm saying?
I
So I
do.
can't really tell you where Asmodee came from. The only thing that I can know for absolute certain, and the key point in my experience with him, is that when I met him, I had no idea that there was an Asmodee. I'd never heard of the name Asmodee. I'd never heard of the description of a being with three heads. One's a man, one's a ram, one's a bull, riding on a dragon. And I had just ordered the Goetia, and he just came out of the book like a genie coming out of a lamp. There was this cloud of energy that came out of the book, and then there was a voice that said, stand back in the room and I'll manifest for you. And I did, and the cloud just opened up, and there he was. And he had three heads, and one was a ram, and one was a man, and one was a bull, and I could see it all perfectly clearly. And he was riding on a dragon the size of an alligator, and he said, pick up the book. And I reached down and I picked up the book, and I'd only owned the book for about 3 days. It was my first day off since I'd gotten it. I hadn't even read it, you know. And he said, open the book. And I opened the book, and I was standing there looking at him, probably drool running out of my mouth. And he said, look down. And I looked down, and there was his description in the book. And it said, the 32nd spirit is Asmodee, and he had this form. He's a great king. He has three heads. One's a man, one's a ram, one's a bull, etc. And I knew that in that moment, I was seeing the spirit that had come out of the book, and he was one of the spirits in the book. So the key thing for me was that I know, and I've known all that time, that the thing that I saw was not created in my mind. It was not a figment of my imagination. It was something that came out of that book, and it took a form that was in the book, and there's no way that I could have imagined something that I had no previous knowledge of. You see what I'm getting at?
Yes. Also, I do believe that anything is possible. I believe that these beings can possess human bodies, whether they displace the soul that is currently inhabiting the vessel, or they take a tangible form themselves. Another thing that was in that post that was astonishing, and I do believe that you are one of Asmodeus' sons. I believe that's also possible. And he said he knew it was you because you were in a tent with Rahab, one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, that's one of the empresses, the demonic empresses, related to like Agrat Bat Malat, or correct me if I'm wrong. Who is Rahab, Arnudell?
Well, the name has been used in several different ways. It was originally a prostitute in the early biblical book of, I believe it was Joshua. And when the Israelites were getting ready to invade the city of Jericho, if I remember correctly, they made an alliance with a prostitute named Rahab, and she hung a red cord out of her window. And when the Israelites stormed the city, they spared her. Now, in later times, there is a demon named Rahab, um, but it's not completely certain if that particular demon is based off of that biblical character or not. You've got another example. One of the Goetia spirits is named Balaam, which may be based off of an ancient Canaanite sorcerer by the same name in the Bible, but we're not sure. Um, some of the things in Liber Asmodeus, that's just the way Asmodee told me to write it.
Okay.
And when I was writing that book, he was with me pretty much 24/7 for months at a time. And I could feel just a hot energy that was all around me. And there was a few things that I just did my best to write down exactly what it was that he wanted me to say, and to attempt to remove myself from the book as much as possible. You'll notice
Right.
that there's no words of Arnudell in the entire book. The whole thing is intended to be his words and his explanation of things. Now, there were a couple instances where he left me to sort of fill in the blanks, like he was the one that laid out the steps of the formula, but he didn't say, okay, I want you to include the forward bend of yoga. He just said, you have to include yoga in there. These are the pillars of the system, and then he left me to fill in the blanks. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, as far as the ancient Al Ghul and the fact that I'm his son, I think it's really important for occultists to try to keep a steady head on their shoulders and to not fall into ego. I mean, I hear people say the most ridiculous things. I've had people say that they're having a baby with Azazel. There was another guy that claimed to be married to the demon Sabnok, and he's in an exclusive relationship with Sabnok, and nobody else can have Sabnok for their lover because it's all him, you know, and just the most ridiculous things. And,
Yeah.
and you know, I just try to keep a sense of humility and groundedness, because I feel like that self-importance and ego can just, they lead to ego trips and eventually make a person foolish. So this is what I know and this is what I don't know, and I'll just try to be honest with you as much as I possibly can.
I appreciate that, and I'd like to say I believe you. I believe, and I believe Ashmodai. I believe the things that he's having you write. I also believe that some of us have been around for a very, very long time. The reincarnation cycle is real. We have no conception of time once we re-enter into the grand pleroma, and the second law of thermodynamics takes over. Our memory is wiped, and we are reintroduced. But there's one Gnostic teacher. His name is Samael Onbior, and he recalls being a rock. He recalls being grains of sand. So, who's to say how long we've actually been here? Some souls are ancient. Like, I know for myself, Belial, he is as old as time itself. And for myself, I'm reminded of past lifetimes that lead me to believe that I've been on this planet for a very, very long time. So I do agree with you as far as keeping a good head on your shoulders, but I do believe that reincarnation exists, and we've been here or we potentially could be immortal. Do you believe in any of that, Arnudell?
I definitely believe in reincarnation. I don't have very many past life memories or things like that, and I'm really skeptical of it. But yeah, for sure, definitely am a believer in reincarnation. It's important to realize that in one sense, it doesn't really matter what you were in the past. It matters what you are right now, because usually people that have a tendency to claim that they remember who they were in a past life, it's never, oh, I cleaned out the horse manure in the stable for someone. You know, I was this king, or I was Queen Cleopatra, or something like that. You know,
Joan of Arc or Sir Lancelot. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but I actually have a pretty interesting past life memory. I was like a slave from Africa, and I was on those ships, and then they kind of disembarked me, and what I did is like got killed because
Wait, they threw you over the ship, or they disemboweled you?
So they disembarked the ship with me and other slaves, and
Okay.
I ended this incarnation of mine by killing a fellow slave, trying to eat him, being catched in it and killed for it. So I think people simply don't want to share the details of their past lives once they discover them. Because if you really go to those regressions, you will definitely find some of the past lives which are not so worthy of being praised. You know what I mean? Like, if everyone was a nice guy in a past life, who the fuck slaughtered in history? You know what I
Right. Yeah, I went into a couple past life regressions. I was never a king or a prince or anything like that. I was a white female at one time that had her heart broken, and I committed suicide by drowning. I was an Asian gangster that was murdered for some type of transgression that I had done. And I was an Asian soldier that was betrayed, and I committed suicide once again. So those are the regressions that I can go into details about. Have you ever done that? No. Looked into past lives?
Have I ever done past life regression? Have I ever done past life regression? Is that what you said? I did a call that was designed to take you to the Akashic records, which are said to be a place where all of the files of everything and every past life is stored. I learned a book called Brim by DJ Conway. And when I went there, I was taken there by a spirit, and there was a lot of different meditations. Some of them led you to places such as the ancient Druids. Some of them led you to places like Egypt or, Lemuria or Atlantis. And I tried all of the meditations, and I could tell that in most of them it was simply just in my own mind. But when I tried two of them, one was a journey to meet a ceremonial magician, and the other one was to visit the Akashic records. There was a point when it distinctly changed from being visualization to a real experience. And I did go to the Akashic records, and I was led into a pyramid, and inside that pyramid there was a rectangular room, and where was sort of a goldish brownish color, and it was a long rectangle, and there was what looked like wrought iron lamps that hung from chains from the ceiling. And the spirit guide sat me down at a table, and the walls of the place were floor to ceiling in books. And it went over and it got one of the books off the wall, and it brought it over and set it down on the table. And it opened the book, and I looked down and I saw a scene, and that scene was a winter scene. And there were people there that looked like Abraham Lincoln, you know, the Civil War era look. You know, they had a top hat on and the long coat, and the woman wore the petticoats. There was a man and a woman. And as I looked at the picture in the book, it turned into a whirlpool type force, like, you know, like a whirlpool. It went inward, and it just pulled me into it like a scene out of Harry Potter, and I was sucked through it, and I came out in that area where that I was seeing on the book. And there was a gently sloping hill, and it was winter time, and there was a little bit of snow on the ground, and there were some tall trees without any leaves on them. And I looked over and I saw the man that was dressed like Abraham Lincoln, and the woman, and the man reached back and he smacked the woman with his fist and knocked her to the ground. And I realized that he was getting ready to you know, take advantage of her. And when I realized that the man was me, it shocked me so badly that I went out back through the book and just knocked me right back into my body. And
Wow.
it wasn't pleasant. And I'd never tried to go back to the Akashic records. But yeah, it happened, you know. And I'd also like to point out that I've had at least 100 astral projections, but I've practiced the astral projection technique at least 1,000 times. So when I talk about experiencing something that's really dramatic, you got to realize that, you know, probably only 1 out of 10, sometimes 1 out of 20 times that I practiced the astral projection technique did I achieve the experience. So it's very difficult. I think I just lost you, JD.
So I lost him too, but he will return. So when we talk about astral projection and the gateways, what about? I think we should return to the Kali again, because she kind of relates to this reincarnation thing. So I worked with her yesterday, and yesterday when I worked with Kali through the technique I already described, you draw the yantra, and then you scry into it and repeat the Kali's name until she arrives. Yesterday, the thing it was, so when you work with her, you constantly get the glimpses of your past lives. But for whatever reason, like those past lives, we always seem to receive the parts of it which have a meaning to us in the present. So they always have a meaning for us in the present. So I kind of received my past life vision in which I was like a soldier, and there was a big, like, Hindu temple, big temple structure, and some form of a ritual was performed there, which involved human sacrifice. And I was actually one of the guards protected the magicians who performed that sacrifice from the invaders outside. And the point of that regression was technically that ritual I protected went really badly. It kind of had catastrophic consequences at the end. from what I can see and what I read about the entire thing. So the point for me personally is that in this specific incarnation, we should try to connect to the divine through distraction, as we probably already do, but we should really be careful, because if you destroy too much too quickly, you will simply blow things up. And I think the point of those regressions is for us to contemplate it, how it helps us in the present, because we always receive some form of information which is useful for us in the present in some way. It's related to the past, but to the present as well.
It's probably true. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So can you, because I am like also heavily trying to master astral projection, and I had maybe few successful attempts, maybe 10, but I tried like over 50 times. So what technique you use to astral project in your practice, if you can share with us, of course?
Well, I've used a lot of different techniques, but the two that I've had the most effect, I could say three that I'd say have the most effect. One was from the Golden Dawn order. I was in the Golden Dawn for 15, 18 years, passed through all of the grades of the Golden Dawn system, and they were extremely, almost obsessed with astral projection. And they had a technique where you would lay down on a bed, you put on your magical robe and your headpiece called a nemes, and you'd lay down on a bed and you would light up your Sephiroth of the middle pillar, and then you'd say a prayer, and then you would project a beam of energy out of your solar plexus, and form an exact duplicate of your body, and then you would attempt to transfer the seed of consciousness through that cord into your body and then explore the astral world from there. And generally what happened to me was that I would go through all the steps of the visualization, and I would be struggling and pushing and pushing and pushing in my mind, trying to leap into that duplicate that we might call the double. And there would come a moment when I would sort of give up, and oh man, I can't do it, I give up, and then at that exact moment when I would let go and stop trying, the meditation or all of the concentration that I'd previously just placed on it would cause it to happen. And there I would be standing right beside my body or out in the room. And I'd be like, wow, this is incredible. Usually what would happen is I'd look around and I would see that everything is made out of trillions of tiny points of light, and I'd often get distracted by something. Like, I remember one time just looking down at the carpet and seeing the long strands of carpet, and seeing that each strand was composed of trillions of tiny light particles, and then after usually about a minute or so, what I gauged to be a minute or so, there just seemed to be this magnetic force that would pull me back. So that's one technique. Then your other technique is just basically a more universal version of that, where you just lay there, and you got to use certain forms of breath control. The Golden Dawn technique was what they called the fourfold breath. And in the fourfold breath, you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold your lungs empty for 4 seconds. And this technique, the breathing technique, is what I would consider to be the real heart of astral projection, because if you can maintain that breathing technique and just stay awake, you'll notice yourself slip out lots of times. But you may have to practice for 20, 30 minutes of that breath control, and then it'll just happen naturally. You'll slip out and you'll be standing beside your body or something like that. But yeah, generally the technique that I used and still use is to light up the chakras and then project out a beam of energy and form a duplicate, and then try to leap into that duplicate, and which almost never works as far as like the leaping into the duplicate body. But if you push and push and push, usually there'll come a point when you stop concentrating for a moment, and then there you are, you're out of your body. And there's a variety of phenomena. Sometimes I will be still in the body, but it seems as if my eyes are opened and I can see the room around me, and I'll literally like feel for my eyelids. Yeah, but they're closed, you know, because it seems that my eyes are open because I can see the room around me. So I can verify that it is possible to see with the eyes closed and to not be able to leave the body. Um, a lot of people talk about sleep paralysis. I've never had that, but it's kind of similar, being stuck in the body and not being able to get out, but being able to clearly see the room all around you as if the lights are on, you know, but your eyes are closed. So yeah, there's lots of different techniques. The other one that I've had experience with, but I don't particularly use on a regular basis, is the one that's in Flying Without a Broom by DJ Conway. And that method is to visualize yourself going through a certain series of steps of meditation. And it could lead to lots of different places. Like I mentioned, there was ones that led to a journey with the ancient Druids or Egypt or Lemuria or whatever. But there will come a point during the meditation when there's a shift between your imagination and your visualization into an experience that you are not in control of, and that differs from the what's written in the book of the visualization. You see what I'm saying?
I understand what you are saying, but I need to give comment on one part of what you said to me. So, for multiple months, I performed exercises on my third eye in order to see how reality looks like from the perspective of the spirit. And those experiments technically started when I started working with Shiva. So I would repeat Om Namah Shivaya for 3 hours until the etheric body of the Shiva would form in front of me. And then I would ask the Deva to help me to open my astral senses to perceive the world around myself from the perspective of the spirits. And after the third meditative session, which lasted for 3 hours with a long mantra repetition, what he did is my third eye started spinning like crazy, and energy started moving around me in like whirlwinds, like entire room was spinning, but in energetic sense. And then I saw exact thing as you described. So I saw that everything is composed out of spirals of light, which create some form of a magnetic pool of energy around them. And everything is those spirals of light in different form. So spirits, animals, plants, stones, all of that is simply spirals of light in a different form. And but there are kind of different levels to that light. So you have more refined levels of it, which are brighter, and then you have the more dense level of it, which seem like darkness and which seem like black light, but they are essentially all the same thing. So it's shocking that you are describing the same thing I saw, but you and I never talked to each other.
That's what it looked like to me, is that everything is glowing. Everything radiates light. It doesn't just reflect light, it is light. And you can see the trillions of particles.
Yes, and what's interesting is it all goes in spirals, and the forms we see are technically illusionary interpretation of that light spiral on that spiritual plane. So every single thing we see is technically a mind game. It doesn't exist. The only thing which exists are technically those spirals of light. It doesn't matter, do we talk about more dense black light or do we talk about more refined yellow light? It's essentially the same thing. So
It's all a matter of perspective. There's an incredibly useful, I believe it's a Kabbalistic meditation where you cast a circle and you pay attention to your feet, and then you kind of envision yourself ascending, and then you see the earth getting small, and then you expand yourself until you see the solar system, and you keep going out until the solar system is. Are you familiar with that meditation, Arnudell?
Yeah, you're talking about the Kabbalistic cross. That's at the beginning of the Lesser Banishment Ritual of Pentagram in the Golden Dawn system.
Yeah, so it's all a matter of perspective. What was really interesting, again, I'm like your secret admirer. I'm always hawking on your posts. So you were talking about doing a meditation, and some ascended masters came and gave you an initiation. Like I find stuff like that just incredible. The implications of stuff like that are limitless. You can achieve ascended form in the flesh, theoretically, if you're initiated to do so.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the 0 = 0 initiation in the Golden Dawn.
Yes.
That was the
Yes.
experience out at the time, yeah. It's in the ritual that I was experiencing, there is a point in the physical ritual when the officers of the temple do circle around the candidate. And I had not read the neophyte 0 = 0 initiation of the Golden Dawn at that time, and I wasn't familiar with it. So when I saw that, and then I later read about it, that point happens in the initiation, it's confirmation that what you're experiencing is real. And I think it's important to realize that there is such a thing as hypnotism, and a trained hypnotist can put someone under hypnotic trance and give them a glass of lemonade or of water and tell them that it's lemonade. And when they drink that water, they will fully experience lemonade. And the mind can produce all sorts of things. People under hypnotic trance have been known to hallucinate. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how much spiritual visions are hallucinations and only in the mind, and how much are actual, real, can be confirmed. You see what I'm saying? And for me, I would say that there's only been probably 10 to 20 experiences in my entire lifetime that I can confirm and say, and once again, I've had, my gosh, 1,000 spiritual experiences, uncountable. But there's only been like maybe 20 where I can say, okay, I can point to this and this and this, which clearly proves that this was not in my mind. Like I was talking about with Asmodeus when he came out of the book, and I had never heard of Asmodeus, and I'd never read about that particular form, those three heads, one's a man, one's a ram, one's a bull, and he's riding on a dragon. That's very specific, that's very exact. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So yeah, that would be one of those instances, like with the meditation that you're talking about. I experienced the spirits rotate around me in a circle, and they were carrying these wands, and I saw that. Well, later when I read the initiation of the 0 = 0 in the Golden Dawn, and that part in the ritual actually happens, then it gives you a solid proof that you can say, yes, this is real. It's not just in the mind, you know.
Absolutely. Do you take in? I'm sorry. I thought you were still talking. Do you take in any stock of by dead magicians? There are. I've heard stories of people summoning Cornelius Agrippa and him coming and teaching an initiate how to make a fetish. Do you think that that's possible? Like, do you think you're getting the consciousness of Cornelius Agrippa or Michael Aquino, like summoning dead magicians?
Um, well, I'd say it's possible, but you got to consider it skeptically. And I'd like to tell you about one thing that I think you'll find very fascinating, and that was in the 1970s. There was a group of college professors, college teachers, that attempted something called the Philip experiment. And if you've never heard of the Philip experiment, you might want to look it up and do a little research after this conversation's over. And what they were attempting to do is to create an artificial ghost. And so they came up with the name Philip Aylesford. They drew a picture of Philip and they made up a little backstory about him, how he lived during the Middle Ages, and he'd fell in love with a woman, and his wife was jealous of that woman and had her accused of witchcraft, and she was executed. And they would sit around and they'd hold seances. Now, these were people that were not inclined towards spiritual things. They weren't New Age types. They weren't witches. They were just, college professors. They had no previous spiritual experiences. And this happened in the 1970s. You can look it up. You can read about the Philip experiment. And they worked at this for several months, and they weren't having any successes whatsoever. And one day they decided to dim the lights just a little bit and to try to take it in a little bit more of a traditional seance mode. So shortly after that, they began to have some very demonstrable scientific effects. Philip would show up and he would dim the lights in the room, and he would also cause the table to knock in response to questions. They could ask him questions. Sometimes they would feel what felt like a ghostly hand touching their shoulder. Now, and this was recorded on video cameras. You can see many witnesses. These were totally reliable people. They were not making a dime of money off of this. Just look it up. It's incredible, the Philip experiment. But and Philip actually got so much power that he could move a table all the way across the room. One time, the seance was late, and he showed up at the room, and Philip got so excited that he caused the seance table that they were sitting around to walk on two legs all the way across the room. Now, the question then becomes, what's that?
No, I'm saying I'm just blown away. I was like, what? Like, where do you reckon the spirit Philip was getting all of its power from? The belief of the doctors, or?
That leads us to an interesting question. Was it truly a spirit that was created by the mass energy of the 7 to 10 researchers that were researching this? Or was there another spirit that came along and it realized that these experiments were taking place and it just kind of jumped in and started having some fun with the situation? We can't really know for sure. All we can know is that these effects were produced and they are well documented. And this is in the 1970s. You can see the videos of this. It was verified by many different observers. And it leads you to another thought, which is this. If Philip can be created by a group of 8 or 9 people and be able to get strong enough to make those kinds of physically visible things, such as lights being dimmed, a table knocking and bouncing up and down and walking across the room and all that. Well, imagine what an entire culture could do. Let's say the ancient Babylonians. If 8 people could create a ghost like Philip, what could 20,000 people worshiping Marduk create?
Wow.
Could they create something so strong that in the ancient temples of Marduk, people were levitated, lights dimmed, candles lit by themselves, and these ancient worshipers would be incredibly awed by these experiences. They would truly believe that the god Marduk is in his temple, or the god Dagon, or whatever, And I'm not saying that Dagon or Marduk were created artificially in this way, but it's an important possibility to consider. You see what I'm saying? If Philip was created. Now, it's also possible that Philip was not created and that some other spirit came in to step in and have fun with these seances, but the Philip experiment is definitely something that every magician needs to read about and study.
like theoretically, the Christian God could be another Philip, just collective belief in a paternal solar deity by so many people over the ages could have created this incredibly thought form that, yeah, so like you said, it's one of two possibilities. It's either a thought form or an actual entity, and there's really no way for us to know. The creation of thought forms is possible. It has been done. Demetrius has created a thought form. I've experienced thought forms. So yeah, it's absolutely possible for sure.
So,
Definitely go look
so, so technically, when you mentioned my thought form, like it's interesting parallel with this experiment, because what I did is I merged four existing spirits into one spirit under a particular mission, under a particular guise. And it kind of fucked shit up, but that story for another day. What's interesting is that Philip could be one or multiple spirits merging with certain thought form in order to give it essence and then becoming a new being. Because what I know from the Hindu experimentation is that there are spirits known as bhoots, and there are technically something between demigods and restless dead, and they reside in the bhoot tala, or the ghost world, right? And that ghost world is technically a part of our world, but it's also a dimension resonant to our plane, right? Which is really close to our plane. So what entities from that plane tend to do is they tend to come and then they tend to attach themselves to whatever is the best opportunity for them to become fed, because they are created from the souls which died in a way which prevents them from being additionally reincarnated. So what could happen in Philip case is maybe one of those boots attached itself to the Philip thought form and gave it essence, and then created a new advanced Philip, which was actually capable of doing those feats. Because if this was ordinary thought form, we create thought forms every day, right? Like if you visualize good pussy while you are pissing, you are technically creating a thought form, but it's not levitating glasses across the room. So I think this is a little bit more complex process.
Still in 9 months, they begin to have these sort of physical manifestations. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the difference between Philip and any thought form. I don't know. A thought itself isn't necessarily a thought form. I don't know. And women don't really know the ultimate the soul. Where do souls originate from? I can't really tell you. Some things are just beyond our ability to grasp, at least in this state of humanity. So
right.
as spiritual scientists, we want to do our best to examine all of the facts of what we know about the spiritual world, and make our best determination and just work from. We never will. Just the cosmos is too vast, really, for us to even wrap our heads around.
Well, we have to differentiate between thought form and an egregore. Like you said, just having a regular thought is a thought form, but an egregore needs to be fed. It needs to be given energy, and to move an object, like to make a table bounce, takes an incredible amount of energy for a non-terrestrial or non-physical being to interact with dense matter. So, yeah. Did you ever try to create an egregore, Arnudell?
No, on my to-do list for some time, one of the things that I on my bucket list is to see something move with anything touching it. An example of levitation or something like that. And there's two methods that I think might lead to it. One is Ashtanga yoga. Crowley described his body leaping or bouncing, the levitating effect when you reach certain deep levels of the eight-limbed process of yoga. Or I would like to carry out some experiments involving spiritualism. I did begin early experiments in spiritualism, but kind of gave it up in pursuit of other things at that time. It's been a lot ago. Both of the things are on my to-do list when I get more time later on in life. I definitely want to attempt to create a fill-up and see if I can get it to move objects, and also go deep enough into the yoga to experience the body balance sensation, the levitations of it. The only thing that I have had in that regard is spiritualists often talk of knocking sounds, cracking sounds in the walls, and there was a particular time in my life when I did experience those, and they were witnessed by several other people in the house, and they were truly phenomenal. It sounds like someone just picked up a 2x4 and just snapped it like a twig. That's what it sounds like a 2x4 cracking. It's very loud. I mean, just crack. You can't believe how loud it is. There is no musical, no sound. It doesn't look like the walls are ripped apart, but it sounds that. There's a it's hard to describe. It sounds like a knock or crack. The best I could describe it is if someone just snapped a 2x4 in half, but there is no physical damage. But yeah, I have experienced those knocking sounds that are caused by spirits, but I have not experienced or seen with my own eyes an object levitate. And that's definitely something. That's sort of the last threshold. I think I've experienced just about everything else in the spiritual experience. From magic, I've seen spells work. I've been on, and I've communicated directly with gods and things like that. I even experienced invisibility. I went fully fucking invisible, and that's not pulling your leg at all.
So when you say invisible, certain goetic entities are known to make a person invisible. Does that mean that they are interfering with the perception of other people's minds, so that they just don't pay attention to you, or they are actually making you turn intangible?
Well, how I got it was with a rule that is designed by the Golden Dawn Order, and it's in a very high grade level, which is the 5 equals 6 grade. And most people don't even know that the Golden Dawn takes invisibility very seriously. And the process is that you visualize a dark purple or bluish egg around your body. And this is called the egg of the god Harpocrat or Harpocrates, the Egyptian god, which is the child Horus. And there's a lot of angels that you invoke and goddesses from the sphere of Binah on the Tree of Life, and also some real heavy Enochian evocations as well. And this ritual itself takes probably an hour to perform. And was just totally obsessed with this ritual at different periods of my life, and I'd written the entire thing on the walls of my temple at that time so that I could completely perform the ritual without even having to look at the book. And I'd practiced it over and over and over, and I came to a period where I was having band practice, and my wife was the two band members that were in my band went out on the front porch, and my wife went into the back room, and I was concentrating heavily on the situation that was going on with my band, and I could hear my wife coming from the back room, and I had the thought, I don't want to talk to her right now because I want to keep concentrating on this problem that I'm having. And then I heard a voice say, if you don't want to talk to her, you can go invisible, form the shroud. That's what they call it, the shroud of invisibility. And I concentrated and I felt the shroud come around me, and it wrapped around me. And my wife came right up and stood beside me. I mean, she was like a foot, 2 feet. I could have reached out and touched her with my hand. And she was walking around the room, and I was completely invisible to her. She just simply could not perceive me. And then um, I realized that I needed to talk to her, and so it felt like I was reaching my hands forward into the egg and sort of opening it like a curtain. And as the exact moment that I opened the curtain, she jerked her head like that and was like, "Oh my God, Howard, I can't perceive you." And I said to her, I said, non-technique, and I become lead blower. Now, from my and I used it on 2 other occasions as well, but from experience, this is how it works. Human beings only take in what we perceive in the world around us. Only part of that is based upon what our eyes visually see. Most of what we perceive in the world around us is based upon our astral senses. And when the egg is formed around you, what it does is it forms a curtain around your aura, and it contains your aura within a particular area. So that aura is not allowed to reach out and connect to other people. And when other people don't feel that connection, they don't look at you. They don't notice you. It's not that you are physically transparent. I imagine that if someone took a picture of the room that you were in, well, and that may be debatable as well, because there was a Rosicrucian who was performing this ritual, and he got to the point where he felt like he was going invisible, and he rigged a camera, and it had a thing where he could remotely activate it in his hand. And when he reached the point when he believed he'd go invisible, he would snap the picture. And he actually took a picture of himself going into that state, and there was a lamp behind him, and you could see that his body became partially transparent, and you could see the light bulb of the lamp behind him. So it's a mysterious thing, and you're invoking forces from the sphere of Binah that are really heavy. I mean, the God form of Harparkrat and all this other stuff, but it is possible. It does happen. It can happen, and it's completely incredible. I mean, I would place it on some of the most heavy, amazing experiences of my life. But once again, it happened 3 times. I did get a little bit of control over it, but it's not something I could do right now because I haven't practiced it in years. I'd kind of compare it to astral projection. Astral projection happens, but it's not like I can guarantee you that I could lay down right now, close my eyes, and have an out-of-body experience. It's kind of hit and miss. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, that's my experience with invisibility. It does really happen. It is possible.
Whoa. Shit. That's awesome.
So, technically speaking, can we talk about Kali again?
Yeah, we have about 12 minutes left on the interview. So do you have any more experiences you would like to share, Arnudell, or would you, as far as Kali goes?
Well, there was one other thing that I would like to point out concerning the last thing that I mentioned about her giving me the mantra, and that is that Kali is known as the mother of mantras, and that she's often pictured wearing a necklace of skulls, and on each of the skulls is one of the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, which demonstrates that she has a total mastery of sounds and sacred sounds. And after she gave me the mantra Boo, I was kind of curious to see if I could find any meaning for it. And so I did a Google search for BHU. And I was shocked to discover that Boo is a Sanskrit word. of all languages that she would give me a sound in, obviously Sanskrit would be the one. So that was very impressive to me because I had no idea that that word actually did exist in Sanskrit. And what it means is base or foundation or to be. And when bu is combined with the syllable ta, it means to be ethereal, as in to be dreaming. And when I had the experience, the first experience that she gave me the mantra, and then as I mentioned earlier, I found myself in a lucid dream where I knew that I was dreaming and I was explaining to someone. Kali gave me a mantra and I'm having the most incredible, refreshing sleep. That is being ethereal. Do you see what I'm getting at there? Bhuta
Yes.
means to be ethereal, and Bu means to be, or is in the foundation. So I was extremely in awe to find out that this word that she gave me is actually a Sanskrit word, and the meaning of it and all that. So, and there's been a couple other times that I've witnessed Kali, but I think those are probably the most remarkable. You know, there was another time when I saw her in a form where she seemed like she had 1,000 hands, and there was another time where I was just standing in the room where I'm at now, and my vision was just suddenly opened, and there she was right in front of me. I mean, in an instant, and it's very shocking. It just seems like your heart wants to stop, you know. But I would also say that when you asked me to do this interview concerning Kali, I really almost, in a sense, didn't feel worthy because Kali is just, when I talk about her or when I think about her, there's just a sense of awe that's beyond any other spirit. I mean, even Goetia spirits, I don't know. And at the same time, I don't really view Goetia spirits as being any different from Hindu gods. And that's kind of a long subject we might get into on another instance as far as the Zoroastrian connection and the
Mm.
fact that Zoroaster was in contact with the Hindus 3,000 years ago, and that several of the Hindu gods actually became archdemons in the Zoroastrian system. And Asmodeus himself comes from Zoroastrianism, and that's a kind of one topic we can get into. It's very possible that Asmodeus himself was a Hindu god because we find that Rudra, Hindu god Rudra, and the Hindu god Indra were adopted by the Zoroastrians as demons within their system. And Asmodee was adopted into Christianity, Judaism, and Islam from Zoroastrianism. So it's possible that he was originally a Hindu god, which was then brought into Zoroastrianism, and from there into the Judaic religions. You see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
That's
there's yeah, there's actually gnosis concerning Beelzebub, saying that he was saying that he was from the Zoroastrian pantheon and he was known as Druj Nassau. So that's just confirming what you're saying. Some of these gods have been transplanted and plucked from other cultures and systems and resurrected, if you will, into our modern culture. So yeah, that's absolutely true.
yeah, but there is one thing I wanna say for the end of this, and that's the fact that in Hinduism specifically, the gods are not as we perceive them in the Western world. For example, let's say Kali. Kali is mother goddess, Kali Ma, but she is also the empress of demons, the queen of demonic entities. Shiva is the god of enlightenment, but he is also the god of demons and destroyer in the form of Shiva Kalabhairav. So And what I also wanted to say is that there is evidence not just from the order of nine angles, but also from Hinduism that there is demonic aspect of Lord Vishnu and Krishna. And that demonic aspect of Lord Vishnu is connected to the Nagas. So Hindu gods are really simply spiritual forces, and one god covers all ends of the spectrum.
Mm.
The light to the deepest darkness. So they are really not definable by human terms.
Yeah, just like Iblis and Azazel and Azaz, all three entities being one and separated at the same time. So yeah.
And actually, when we talk about Hinduism, there is a lot of like Agorias who live in Pakistan and the northern parts of India who work with jinns too. So there is a really good possibility and probability of mixing Jinnic and Hindu practice, Jinn magic and Hindu practice at the same time. And it is actually the goddess Kali, out of all entities, who told me what is the reason why Jinn, specifically the Shayateen race of Jinn, are obsessed with baneful magic. The reason why they are obsessed with baneful magic is because baneful magic thins the veil between the worlds and allows all forms of spirits to pass freely through the veil. So then I reshaped the baneful magic. So instead of cursing the person, I curse the veil directly. And then what happens as a result? Let's say you go 10 days to one place and you curse the veil every day, right? On that one place. Every time you do the invocation at that place, the results will be exponentially better. And technically, the goal of the Sinister path, which is ruled by Kali, by Iblis, by Shiva, by all of those transgressive entities from all of those different cultures, they all technically have similar way of thinking. Is to use astral energy to create literal physical connection between us and all of the spiritual planes through baneful magic. Because baneful magic is indeed the most effective way of creating those forms of gateways. So that was like the last thing I wanted to say for this podcast. And it also kind of ties into Ashmedai a little bit, because Ashmedai is also heavily connected to the genic current, but unfortunately we have only hour and a half. So
So, Arnudell, can you tell the audience about what you're working on currently, your last two books, or talk about any of your other 15 or however many other books that you have, and where they can get them and how they can reach you?
Well, I have 2 books, and I've got another 10 in my right now. I'm taking break from things and combining the money from my books and the other job because I want to do some things that are not book related. For instance, I'd love to get in a rock band again and open for some big acts. I see a guitar there behind you. And are you a
Yes,
guitar player?
I am.
I am as well. I've been in a lot of rock bands and played with some pretty big acts over my years. I've opened the show for Disturbed and Kill Switch Engage and
Really?
Drowning Pool and bands like that. Yeah, I had some pretty heavy success in several different bands, and I kind of like to put one last band together and kind of go out and have their do to rock and do that. But I do have coming. I'm going
Well,
to do a. Go ahead.
Well, there's definitely a connection between spirituality and music. Making music is a magical act for sure. Yeah, I seen you playing the other day. You're actually pretty incredible. But you were kind of breaking up there. What's your latest project you're working on as far as your books?
Well, I've got several. The one that's on my mind most heavily right now is a fully illustrated edition of the Grimoire Verum. The four most important demon grimoires, from my perspective, are the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, the Grand Grimoire, and the Grimoire Verum. And I have fully illustrated editions of the Goetia, the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, and the Grand Grimoire out, and I've always wanted to release an edition that was fully illustrated with all 44 spirits of the Grimoire Verum having images. But it's going to take a while. I've got a really good art team of Matti Sinkonen and Ville Vuorinen, some guys that live in Finland and do artwork for me. They're really great. I love them guys. But yeah, I've got to come up with a couple thousand for art, and then I'll be able to kind of move forward to some of these other projects.
And where can people go to find your books, and how can they reach you if they would like to reach out to you?
Facebook is the best way to get a hold of me, and all of my books are on Amazon. I write under both Arnudell, Overman, and also my earlier work was under Diablito, Ordo, Al Ghul, concerning the Al Ghul system.
Yeah, I seen that. I love that post, by the way, with Asmodeus, man. We are just about out of time here. Arnudell, thank you for coming on. Hopefully we can get you again for another interview if you would be so kind to indulge us again with another conversation. I would love that.
Sure, man. We'll do it again sometime. It was nice to be able to face-to-face contact with you. It's so much easier to feel what someone's talking about when you can see their facial expressions and things like that. Last time we just talked to audio. It was a lot nicer this time to be on video. But yeah, I'd definitely come back for another interview sometime. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you talking. I enjoyed both of your perspectives on spiritual and magic and spirits, you know.
Yeah, this conversation, it went really fast, and it didn't seem like an hour and a half. I really enjoy your insights. What were you saying, Demetrius?
So technically, for the end of this clip, like, I would like to invite you on the podcast again as soon as you want it. And I think next time we should really heavily dwell into Jinn magic and Asmodeus connection to the Jinn and to demons. Like, this time we just scratched the surface. But I think there is so much to talk about you, Arnudell, because you kind of created the entire stream within black magical community with your Liber Al Ghul, right? Whenever I want to Google something on Asmodeus or ask some black magicians about Asmodeus, they always talk about you and your book, Liber Al Ghul. And if there is an expert on Asmodeus in this magical occult, that's kind of you. And I think we should really have one Asmodeus dedicated podcast, because you are more into magic than I am into earth. Like, you practice magic more than I have years. So it's really a pleasure to talk to somebody from older generation who is willing to share with us experience. Because a lot of those older guys, when you ask them questions, they simply say, you don't do it by the books, you fucking young motherfuckers. And they're all of the discussion. But it's really different.
Yeah, well, Arnudell's got he's got the traditional setup. He worked really hard on it. Did you paint all? Is that like a mat on your floor as far as the the triangle of art and the invocation circle, the Solomonic circle? Did you paint that?
I did paint it. It's on the back of a scrap of carpet, and the triangle is made out of plywood.
I was wondering how you did that. I was like, what? That ain't no cheap become a bog freaking piece of cloth. That thing is heavy duty. So yeah, it's awesome.
I think I should get a pad on making circles on the back of carpets because like I've been doing that for 25 years and I can almost take credit for bringing that back. You know, putting carpet or putting magic circles on the back of a carpet's really it's a useful way to do it. But you can draw them on the floor or whatever. You know, lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I have a lay carpet right here right now. I'm not really artistically inclined, but yeah, I suppose I could take my time with it and get it done though. But yeah, we have to end the recording now. Again, Arnudell, thank you for coming on, and hail Kalima, and hail Ashmodai. And yeah, we'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks again, Arnudell. Sincerely.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.
We'll see you later.